start with a very special start. I'm not going to tell you, you're just going to hear it. And then, yeah. Okay. Ayanda, over to you.
Monde Nkosi isihlahla sami legoli ngama21 Nhlangulana sakhishwa nempande sawachelela ejozini umgungundlovu nasethembeni sakhona sabe umthunzi kaNkosi mama wela ikhandlela elivutha la kumnyama khona umhlala beyisongela abafazi namadoda bethi ecimanini wekhandlela sikadle enyameni isibuko sobungcweti nobunoni xabunga elinephunga elimnandi njengozamlandela kubantu engemutho odonsa abathenga esipaza shop indoda ephumelela ngokuyikhandla abanye bephumelela ngenhlanhla esebenza ubusuku nemini njengenhliziyo ivuka bisalele lalisebephupha abanye unyawo ziyaqhika banempumelelo khona njengesigobhe ekhanda lomfazi okotheko ushosholoza ngabambere endlela unebheke empumelelo ngoba ukuhluleka kuye kwizivakashi ekuvulayo wabashayiswa kwengane angayizala abafundi basekho ezinikoleji obuya distinction abanganomchibelebe umdlalo ebasketball nelabo aphinda ubuye eboys esikoleni umkinye ephela ipalazo yike University of Cape Town wabuya ne-Bachelor of Business Science ne-Honours in Finance waba kayishisanga impephe omelo le-Stanford University wabuya nama-masters amabili bekamalunde ekamina nengamanje azoba yi-ajengile eqala nasebholeni bashiya ngathi banole kusokada kuwanjiso Barcelona umlando ngamakhamba amakhulu iChiefs noLiverpool ibuyisa ngona umvula yantambama ebusithembe enganini zakwabo ozingo ayanda nozanele lajawola nekade belihudula ikhulu beziko umlilo abacima ngoparafini beparket avutha kakhulu uzovutha ngasekhizweni kamalifakane esiphalaphala sebuthathu indoda evuswa zilenkinga zayo ngothamela abantu abakhukanye izinonaleda amanye amadoda esalebe uvuswa mahala. Mavuso Msimang idona hela suka nosukhanya nokunyama empilweni zabantu umtshalo enhlakaniphe ehlabathini emngondo zabasha the plant of Woolston with the soil of young minds Iphiza mzingela ngemfundo amanye zingela ngezitho umkhubona abantu uMakhosi esesha owakhuze ngohlalo ngosolelo wabeloqino sekhambeni wena usaba Msimang uzove ngasundo umbuko wayo eqhawela seAfrica umkhondo engagogo indoda ekuthenjwele kuwe njengendla kagogo emakhaya indoda engathengeki kube njengesulumane mesethele yavala esitolo ngoba sembheke esikhoni insika mndembesizo baba kasiswa baba kamanje Solomon sengeziwe umthunjwe abadala nabancane sibanisa abafuna indlela Mavuso wezwela kithi ndonyama ebhodle majojo kunemnando konke kakhongolo somuntu mayethembo wasibanyela inkolelo namhlanje esizwe banefuna amalungelo mntwana wasemkhulu uDlovu umsuku lapho boshelela ePlanos umsamatsha semasondeza ungamlomazi uBotswana iTanzania neRussia waphendula isikhungo sokufundela ukukhulula abantu sandla sikathamba isithembu amakhosi omzabalazo wahlala eduze wekhulu kodwa inhliziyo yakhe yahlala phakathi kwabantu isifundiswa saseFort Hare isifundiswa saseFort Hare umntwana wasemgolodlovu umnqamulo wamazwi uBotswana neTanzania sandla sikathamba isithembu amakhosi omzabalazo wahlala eduze wekhulu kodwa inhliziyo yakhe yahlala phakathi kwabantu inkolo yonke leminye ukuhlelana emthonjeni wakho zamaqhawe mathotho omzabalazo uzela nqamula amazwi lafika nasenhlizweni zamaqhawe uyisibonelo sobuqotho isifundo sokwethembeka baba Msimang ukhulunkulu
This gentleman sitting next to me who gave us his introductions is Ayanda Ntuli. He is a poet and a musician, and it's a privilege to be able to give him a platform here today to demonstrate his wonderful talent. He's available on TikTok, Apple Music, all the stuff you see on the slide over there, so to support him, to follow him. I think latest song has just over 1 million views across YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, etc. I think about 3 months old. Now we chose to start our session that way, a slightly unconventional way with Bebong, because it represents two things that are very important to the two of us and that have contributed to bringing us together. And the first is pride in our cultural heritage, and the second is self-worth. We both believe that everything we do out in the world stems ultimately from a place of solid self-worth and grounding. And that it's very hard to have that without having some pride in your cultural heritage. And it's effectively that cultural heritage is the inheritance that we get from those who came before us. And whether you are Zulu, Afrikaans, Hindi, English, Portuguese, Xhosa, Tsonga, the list could go on and on, as I looked in the names preparing for this event. So, whichever grouping or combination of groupings that you come from, you do have a rich cultural inheritance. So thank you to Ayanda for so wonderfully reminding us of that cultural inheritance. So as I sit in front of you right now, I sit on the shoulders of giants. One of those giants is alongside me, Msimang, Mavuso Msimang. And another is the organizer of this event, Lincoln Mali. I saw somewhere here, she seems to have stepped out. So thank you to the Lincoln Mali Leadership Foundation for having us, and to Kuku for organizing our session so well. My job is quite easy. I'm going to say a few remarks up front, and then the main event will really be listening to Msimang on topics of mentorship and purpose. And then the second hour will be all interactive. So only the first hour will be talking about it, will be very important. In my professional career, some of the logos, we weren't going to put them all, but some of them which you see there, spent some time in consulting at Bain & Company, in private equity at FFL Partners in San Francisco, and now here in South Africa at a firm called VCP, Value Capital Partners, which you see on the page there. I've also had some great experiences through that journey, which are the sets of logos you see at the bottom, and again, just putting a small subset. So some of those, for instance, I was on the board of my first JSE listed company at 28, which was a wonderful experience and great mentorship, which is part of the topics that we're here today, where I was probably half the age of the next youngest person. Attending the Youth G20 Summit in Russia, speaking at the One Young World Summit, a range of great memories, some of which are on that page. And one of those great memories, or special memories, was the Archbishop Tutu Fellowship, becoming an Archbishop Tutu Fellow. And it was there, at a 10-day retreat in Montfleur, Stellenbosch, that I met Mavuso Msimang. He came into my life at just the right time. This was in 2024. So one of the things I was grappling with at that time was this topic that I mentioned right up front, identity, self-worth, those two topics. And identity is a complicated thing. There's many parts to it. If you just take some of mine, for instance, some elements of my identity, I'm Swati, I'm South African, I'm from KZN, I'm black, I'm male, and there's many other parts of my identity. But the one within those many parts of my identity that has really been attacked for centuries in its self-worth, so to speak, is our blackness. And I sometimes feel, and we had this conversation over lunch, people don't really take us seriously. I'll give a very recent example. I bought a new car a month ago, and a stranger comes up to me, compliments me on the car, and he says, "Yo, you must have gotten a tender, eh?"
Which must be a fancy car.
I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have said that to a white guy. Yeah? Now, growing up, I remember once being told as a child, by an adult as well, "You're the best black I've ever seen at mathematics." So it's one thing for others not to take us seriously, but where it becomes really damaging is where that seeps into our own view of ourselves. So if I just take a small example, which people do quite frequently, you'll hear us as black people saying fairly frequently, referring to a boss or someone who's in charge as umlungu or umlungwa. Anyone ever heard that? So directly translated, for those who don't understand the language, that directly translates to white person or my white person. And that is said, by the way, even if the person in charge is black, that's still a white person. So Mavuso and I had a conversation on this at lunch in 2024 in Stellenbosch. And then we decided to evolve that into a series of articles, which was titled "On the Shoulders of Giants." It was published by City Press and News 24, and that was in the same year, that was back in 2024. So what we decided to do in that series was to profile 4 lesser-known black figures who were excellent in their fields. And that's to counter this false narrative that a successful black person is successful because of tenders or whatever the case may be, or that black people are not good at, pick your thing, maths, science, whatever it is that it's said that black people are not good at. So to name a few from that series, we profiled South African Stanford-trained civil engineer, who then switched and became a medical doctor and then a pediatrician. So that's this gentleman on my right over here, Dr. Soli Lufakani. We profiled South Africa's first black female lawyer. We profiled a rocket scientist who has a planet named after him, all of whom were black South Africans, and he's Harvard educated. So that's just to name, a couple of the profiles. There were many more. You'll remember, but our long list had,
Sure.
We could have gone on, we could have written 50 articles of this nature, of truly exceptional black South Africans in their respective fields. So for me, that has since evolved into a range of other projects, still centered on two things, centered on education, for one, and secondly, on black self-worth. To an extent where I believe that these two areas hold much of what is going to prove to be my life's work. And those are both areas where I want to make sure that I leave a legacy. Msimang has played a big role in that, in helping me to identify and pursue that purpose. Therefore, when Lincoln got in touch asking me to speak here today, there was no better person who I thought of who I should do this with than Msimang, who's been so pivotal in my own journey. And we chose the topics of mentorship and purpose. So, Msimang, the hard work is now up to you. My hard work is done. How would you describe your purpose and your life's work?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm a bit unconventional, and I think I should be allowed to do that. When we were in Kongwa camp in Tanzania, getting ready to come back to South Africa, when somebody put you on a scheme that you're not very sure of, you said they're launching you, almost like they launch you into space. This is what this man is doing to me. I was born in 1941 in Pietermaritzburg, Edendale, and I grew up in Newcastle. Was very much influenced by my grandfather, Khumalo, who was educated. He was a world-wise person, and I learned just that early that it's important to understand, place yourself in the context of what's happening in the world. He was on the farm, and he had cattle, oxen that he would span. I'm telling you, I still remember their names today. I will have been 6 years, 7 years. There was Churchill and Stalin in front. There was Bismarck and von Bock. There was, all of that. So I started believing that it's really important to know what's going on around the world. And the purpose was to educate yourself, do the challenge as we grow up, which is slightly different from you guys, was to participate in freeing your people. It may have required courage. I think it was easier than it is for you to participate in those kinds of purposes, because your challenge is, how do I get involved in dealing with HIV and AIDS or this and so. We had somebody who said, "You are black, you're not going to do this." And to just stand up and fight against that was, in relative terms, easier than that. So I have spent the best part of my life in trying to improve, first to fight for the liberation of this country. There'll be lots of questions about that, which I would welcome. But also, once that was over, to serve people. I was not quite a civil servant at one time I was, but I was in the public service. And the important thing was to really get black people. When people talk about transformation, it's really a strong requirement. You have had people, on the treadmill, if you will, for 300 years plus and keeping black people off from that. So with the imperative to make sure that in whatever way we can help them to participate in their promotion so that they get empowered. So my other purpose in life is to try and empower people to the extent that I can. I spent about close to 20% of my time. I'm retired, but my grandmother said you only retire when you go to the grave. So I'm busier than I was when I was working. And almost 20% of my time, I talk to young people. I haven't framed it into anything that takes money or what, but when they ask about what happened, good or bad, I feel I have an obligation to inform younger people. Firstly, because they were not there at the time when I was, but also because whatever happens, the future is theirs.
So what I would say is really listen, be yourself here. This is not a session on, we're not learning calculus here or something like that. This is a session where bring your whole self to it and really listen deeply to what he's saying and don't feel the need to ask a smart question. Whatever's on your mind when we get to the time at Q&A, just bring it out. And even if it's not a question, if it's a comment, that's fine as well. I know one of the rules was to ask you a question at the end. We won't stick to it. So empowering people, seeing that as a big part of his work and spending a lot of time today with young people, which is something important around this table. As you think about mentorship and do you have mentors, are you spending time with people who are older than you or see more of the journey? There's a 50-year age gap between us, and we can sit and spend time and have a good, fun conversation as friends would have. So it is possible. By the way, on that 50-year age gap, when I'm with him, so once a lady came to me and said, "Is that Morgan Freeman?" He said yes.
No. I said, "Oh, really? Does he know that he looks like me?"
So I'm keen for you to tell us about some of the people you've had in your life who you considered mentors or people you've looked up to. You touched on your grandfather, and we'd love to hear more about him as well.
Sure. But I wanted to touch on another purpose in life before I forget it, which is to really help us reclaim our culture. Part of the colonization project was to remove us from our culture, whether physically by putting us in squeezed places called townships or what have you, denying us literacy, so that our history is only oral. I am writing a memoir, and the first part of it deals with genealogy. And the intention is to really encourage, there are some among our young people today who do not know their great-grandfather. And through no fault of theirs. We had a discussion with the University of Joburg and said, how about when people pass their first degrees, BA in social science, whatever, why don't you give them an honors or master's degree on going to investigate, doing research on where they came from. Let it be supervised as it should be. So it really is important to know, it's not just a cliche to say, if you don't know where you come from, you don't quite know where you're going. So it's important. I think we should really start looking at why we are at the foot of other races, and we are, by the way. I'm happy I'm black, I can say that. If a white person were to tell you that, you wouldn't take kindly to it. But the thing about famine, well, it's somewhere in Africa. Drug abuse. So claiming that. So regarding the people who have influenced me, quite a bit of them. I started with my grandfather, really, who used to read on the countryside, and his level of education was what they called at the time what was it? Royal education. He passed standard 6, as he knows these Rommels that I'm talking about. He was a standard 6 person. He read the Indian Views, Torch. He had the Star being put on the mail and in the mail and sent and delivered at his place. So from him, it's to say you must know your surroundings. Person who has really influenced me, I'm not dropping names here, I happen to have been around there. It's a guy called Oliver Tambo. That man was just effortlessly humble. Not trying to sit next to you to show that he just was very humble. And it's a person who was extremely intelligent. Maybe shouldn't take credit for that, he's born with that. But he sailed through his education on scholarships. Didn't come from a family that had money. But what I learned from him was really, again, the issue of empowering people, of trusting people, of being very honest when there was a difficult situation. And if you're involved in things political and liberation, the by-name of those things is conflict and disagreement. But principled, the person is, to the extent that if you are doing something wrong, he would call you aside, talk to you, and unless you told other people, it's a matter between the two of you, and all of that. So it's trust that I think you need to invest in people. And when you show somebody that you trust them, they will do the job and not just do it because it has to be done, because they don't want to disappoint you. You've invested so much credence, confidence in the person. That's a lesson I took from Tambo. But his the ANC was in exile. Many people think it was nice for 30 years, and he led that, and it didn't split. And that was thanks to the kind of person that he was. The arguments about, okay, continue.
No, thank you, Robert. That's beautiful. I mean, the 5 points that I took from from your grandfather, he was a reader, and he kept himself informed. A man with only a grade 6 education had an ox named after Otto von Bismarck, and it's phenomenal. Humility, empowering others, honesty and tough conversations, and trust, lessons that you took from some of those mentors. What I loved about that is not both of those people, they might not have considered themselves formally his mentors. I spoke about some of the people whose shoulders I stand on earlier. I don't think my grandmother would go and think she's my mentor now. But the point is, they're all around us. Right? You take lessons from people who are all around us. They don't have to formally have the title. Do you formally have the title? You're a mentor of mine.
No, I don't know what it means.
Exactly my point. So they're all around us. One of the things I do struggle sometimes a bit, you'll get an email with someone who you don't know asking for you to mentor that. And it's just, it's red and fire. You don't have any basis to start on. You get a lot of these emails.
That's me, yeah.
So what's your sense? How do you respond when you get an email like that?
Yeah, I just say, why don't we come and have a discussion? And let me find out about what interests you, what bugs you, why do you think there's something I can tell you of value? And then the conversation starts. And it's amazing how I wish I was taught how to mentor and put these things down. I would answer these questions more intelligently. But, a lot of the time, say, can we talk again? Because part of your experiences have lots of lessons for other people. Not always good things, but difficult situations. But it's really good for people to share. That's part of the property of a human being.
100%. Who has sent one of those emails? Okay, we've got a new path now, which is to set up a first conversation and take it from there. If there's a bond in a relationship that works. The second thing that I loved in what you said. So, if I take the education levels of some of the people whose shoulders we stand on, my education level would be higher than my grandmother's, an example.
Oh,
Yours would be far higher than Standard 6. Well, not
it's a little bit, yeah.
far higher than Standard 6. So mentorship and people you can learn from is not a thing about is this person necessarily senior, they necessarily educated, or the fact that the point may be you can learn from all sorts of people, and whether they be in your family or outside of your family, there's a lot to learn from the people around us. So if I take your answers on the two questions that I asked up front, the struggle against racism and your task of empowering people has been a big part of your life. What I like about yours is it's in multiple phases, so it's not solely the struggle against apartheid. That's only one phase of your life. The other two you mentioned were important as well, which was administration post-1994,
Sure.
which is closer then to when people would have been born who are sitting around this table here today. And then this third phase you're in since you retired, where you've been, quite honestly, one of your own party's harshest critics on topics like corruption. You signed that ANC elder statement, 100 odd of you, when you felt the party wasn't going in the right direction, and that's all stuff that would have happened very much now. These are sort of the 2020s and the late 2010s. So at a time when everyone around here was here. So if you look across these three phases of your life, and sitting in front of a talented young audience around us today, what are some of the lessons which you'd want to draw out from your journey, which you think are relevant to the people in front of us today?
I think one of the most important things for anybody is to have integrity. You can be however smart, but if you lack integrity, your respect is gone and your effectiveness is just gone. I think you should ask people to do what I do rather than do what I say, because so that's another aspect of it. You can't ask people to do things that you feel you're entitled to stop them doing things that you feel you're entitled to do because you have a position. So integrity is quite it's basic. The problems we have in our country today is that people believe that a lot of our leaders don't have much of that. To open a newspaper or listen to these things and hear about people who have taken money, and this is why we are in trouble, by the way, right now. I think we are at our weakest since 1994. So corruption is what you introduce that as. Corruption is bad because you take people's money. Money is supposed to be used for other things. But the worst thing for me with corruption is that you place incompetent people to carry out your agenda. And the cost is incalculable. A person who should have signed a contract but has no clue about the importance of that contract will just sit there and so on. So that's another aspect. It's another problem with corruption. Also accountability. There is so much criminality because there is no integrity, because people are bribable and all of that. These are all the consequences of corruption, if one may relate to that. And by the way, when we're done with the Zimbabweans, when we're done with all the other people, then we'll go after the Xhosas or Zulu or whoever. That's the next step. If you've got problems, that's the group that is causing them. So we really need to be very careful about this. And when people say let's not follow this route. You are not saying you accept illegality. I think the people who are here, 90+%, I once worked at Home Affairs, come through the Home Affairs doors. They don't cross the fences. Too far for a Nigerian to cross they come through ports of entry, and because we're corrupt, we allow them in. So I think I would just say, I don't know what we can do, how we can take the message across. I would be doing much on Home Affairs, on the police station and so on, because that's where the problem is. Instead of looking at people, many of whom are innocent, if I dare say. And if they are here illegally, partly it's your system. I was at Home Affairs, somebody comes in and says, I'm a refugee, I need asylum. Give them a piece of paper that says asylum seeker. The inefficiency of the system is such that each time 3 months finishes, they come to stamp this thing. You're not ready because you have not determined whether they are or not. And so some have been here for 10 years, etc. So I'm just saying, let's be very discriminating about dealing with issues that are causing our problems and so on.
That's lovely, and quite a few lessons actually that I take from that. The first clearly is integrity. And I am keen to talk a little bit more about what exactly that means to you in a way that's practical here on the table, as well as the accountability. But the meta point for me that stood out was you went to a sensitive topic, which is March and March, everything that's going on with that, and people wanting to chase away what they're framing as illegal immigrants. And I felt the energy in the room change. I felt a few sort of squeaky bums around the table. And one of the lessons I took from that is a meta point there in what you're saying is the tough issues of your day, you do have to have a view and be involved in. It does always feel easier when you look back at, say, what year did you go into exile?
1963.
1963. Someone sits back and thinks 1963. It always feels like apartheid must have been the only thing going on in the whole world. There are probably 10 other topics, big topics. Sure. You chose to be involved in it at that time, and to take up the struggle. And as you've continued in your latter life, including your retired life, you've always got a view on the topic of the day, and you put your view out there, including through newspapers and writing op-eds, some of which don't age well, and that's the nature of writing. But being brave and putting your view out there is, I think, a very valid lesson from what Msimang is saying. And then another two that I'd want to draw out from you. So if I go back to we didn't talk bios yet because Ayanda did a wonderful job of describing us. But if I take your bio as it's written over there, you worked in quite a few different fields, both pre-94 and post-94. And pretty much now more than ever, people do change careers. What you study isn't necessarily what you're going to spend the rest of your career in. They're making people around this table going through career changes, considering career changes. Talk to us a little bit about managing transitions in your life and any message you'd have here around the table. And then the second one, please, I'd like you to address is you spoke about two people you consider mentors, your grandfather, Archbishop Khumalo, as well as Oliver Tambo. And then you also are a mentor to others. What are some of the traits you see best in people who you want to see again, who you want to have a second lunch with, a third lunch, a fourth lunch, and who take lessons? So career transitions as well as what you find in the best in mentors.
Career transitions in South Africa, there was a need. Oh, career, okay, fine, not just transformation, career transition. Yeah. I always, when I was out of the country, I worked for international organizations, NGOs, and also for the UN system. And what I have always thought I should do is to learn something, provide a service if it's appreciated. And I just felt confident that I should be able to go and do something else. So here I came back, was with an NGO, with SA Tourism, etc. I just thought, fix things and go. If we should be able to do that. But that's not to say people must not just stay in jobs for 20 years and so on. If that's your calling and that's your space, that's fine. But in this volatile, in this world of ours, the transition of South Africa to democracy meant there were very many areas to address. And if you were able and willing to do that, I just thought that's what it would be. I worked for national parks at a certain time. I'd never seen anything called conservation in my life. And I think it would be called cadre deployment today. So the institution was discharging its responsibility of doing conservation, recognized worldwide.
Yes.
But it was just so Afrikaner, not even white, Afrikaner, the Pakerat, you know. And when I arrived there, they used to call me an alien species, you know. You know, in these things, these plants that you bring from other places and so on. Yeah. And not because it was racist, but they just did not understand that there's something called generalist in approach. If you've got technical people to do things that they're supposed to do, a generalist manages an institution to achieve its set objectives, which are not always technical, but which require a transformation of systems and of minds and so on. And I think that's what I wanted to do and did reasonably well. I was at Home Affairs, which was called the Department of Horror Affairs at a certain time because of the problem. But when we left there, Princeton University said the changes that have been made are irreversible. And of course they didn't know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And the second question that you tried to dodge, the people that are the best at receiving from you and that you want to see again. So as mentees, let's say, what are some of those traits that you see?
Yeah, I think people who first of all understand that knowledge is acquired are the people that you work with because they have an eagerness to accept, to absorb. I was looking at something here, don't want to talk political things. Said, what would you learn from your predecessor on this? Said, I have nothing to learn from that person and so on. Well,
don't be a know-it-all.
So I success in mentoring, and I'm really using the crudest definition, is seen in people feeling that they can do things better. They have the absorptive capacity to change from where they were, and they have the confidence to move on and do the things that they might have been hesitant to do before they sat with somebody who gave them. So it's a learner, it's a learning mind, it's an inquisitive mind, but it's one that is willing to accept that there is room for improvement.
Absolutely, no, that's wonderful. And I think that has a lot of lessons around this table. I'm sure around this table there are both mentees and mentors to others. You're in that middle between two generations on either side of you. So I 100% echo what he's saying there on both sides of that table as a mentee and a mentor. Someone who you have a conversation about something, and before your next conversation they'll have taken an action on it. They'll have done something, successful or not, but they'll have done something. That's someone who you want to see again. It's someone who's energizing. And then, yes, a know-it-all is probably the last person you want to see again. Because what's the point? They know it all already. So I'm going to shift us over into an audience exercise. We've got the after lunch slot, and I can feel the energy is feeling a bit low. So we're gonna switch into, people ate too much at lunch. We'll switch into an exercise. So and then go into Q&A after that. So let's get the energy back a little bit. I mentioned right at the beginning that I stand on the shoulders of giants. Msimang, a giant as he is, he's mentioned some of those whose shoulders he stands on, Kumalo, Oliver Tambo, and there are many others who we would speak about if we had more time. And what is clear through that is these are not, it's not go find the two most influential people you know. It's people who have actually had an impact on your life and who have informed. By the way, they don't even have to know you, those people, to have had an impact in your life. So what I'd like you to do around this table, everyone has people whose shoulders that they stand on, and as all of you sit around here, we'd love to learn about some of who those are. So I'm going to ask you to break into pairs. Just take the person next to you, so we're not going to complicate it. Don't go with someone you know, just whoever's sitting next to you right now. I'm going to ask you to take 5 minutes in total, so take 2.5 minutes each. Just describe to the person sitting next to you, tell them of one person who, as you sit here today, whose shoulders you're sitting on, and why that is the case. And then when we come back in 5 minutes, so at 5:30, then I'm going to call on a few of the pairings to give us some of the people who they stand on the shoulders of. So let's do that. Let's break and stay in the room. So just have it right here. So let's start that way. I hope that all of you have managed to describe whose shoulders you sit on. So let's take then a couple of the people with the mic. I'll ask you to stand, tell us who you are, and tell us who the person who was speaking to you, whose shoulders they stand on.
I think the shoulders that he stands on, I'm trying to remember the name, it's Nondobozo Madonsela. And one of the reasons why those are the broad shoulders that he stands on is because she's a disruptor. She likes doing chaotic work and work. She does the work that is unconventional. She's a go-getter, and that has taught him so much, and it makes him want more and always strive for more. So those are the shoulders that he stands on.
I think my dad, because at 18 years old, I'd been expelled from school. I was in and out of jail. I was trying to leave the country. I was part of a group of very angry young people. And my father found me in the church where I was hiding. And he asked when I got back to school. We had back to study for 2 years. And I had all the stickers. Our leaders are in jail. I was demanding in that. And he said, it's not the size of the stone you can throw against the police. It's not the potency of the battle bomb you can throw against the army. It's a quality of education for cats. It's the values in life. It's a principle you uphold, and you being the best version of yourself for the society you want to create. And that was probably the most profound conversation in my life. And went to mobilize students to go back to school. Except there was a small problem that no school would accept me because obviously I was a bit of a troublemaker. But Mrs. Stanika Boba took us in at UL High, and she said, I don't know you, I know your parents. We could do your political things, but you must pass, and I must never see you in this office. So I never went to the office again. And she's been a mentor and a guide for me. And some of the things you saw in the video, she's the chief volunteer in the work that we do. And she's remained a mentor thanks.
Beautiful.
It's good the norm would be to have a record. We depend on oral history because we were deprived the opportunity of literacy. So right there, how you mold that, even just knowing who your great-grandfather was, if you were to go to Home Affairs, not that I knew anything about those things, if they had a dom pass, that begins to give you something around which you can build the time and place where your people were. I think really what we should encourage going forward now is to really take these things down. Nothing is better than a written record because oral gets lost in the telling, not deliberately. But so I don't know if I'm answering this correctly, but it's It's an absolute must. That's why we feel that if we could encourage people to get supervised research, it's really important that it's done properly and you don't just go and tell your own stories. To have these records, when people in South Africa who came into this country talk about the 17th century, ancestors who did this, that, and you feel a little robbed. The answer is, what capacity do you have to make you aware? I think if you go in there not equipped for the task that you have been given, which is, for instance, let's choose anything. If you lead, your responsibility is to provide a service, supply water. You will not be aware of the needs of the people if in fact your heart was never there in the first place. You can be very literate, you can be educated and all of that. So the question that you're asking, for me, if I just want to be a little more granular, is the suitability of the people to discharge their responsibilities. That's what must be questioned. Because if you aren't aware, whether it's history or the requirements of your job, then really you are a person who is not, you won't be aware. You're just not equipped to do that. How do we end up with people like that? The system is rotten, is not functioning properly. In our country, you have what is called proportional representation. So you don't go to a constituency and get people to vote for you. You belong to a party, and if that party gets enough percentage votes, and that translates into seats in parliament, and you get in there. How they choose you, how you get to be in the top. I'm always tempted to say things that irritate people. A party that I'm very close to, when you look at the people who are at the top because of this representational system, you wonder why a person like Naledi Pandor, makes sense, couldn't make it to the top 15. And those who are in there made it. So the system is corrupted. This system is corrupted. So a lot of our leaders are not aware of what the needs are. And when they are, they have no conscience, no consciousness about, and the accountability that we talk about. No one pulls you to explain why you have not achieved what you're supposed to achieve. So answer, correct your system, eliminate corruption, and you can eliminate it. You really can. It's unfortunately we're in a living environment. You can't just cancel. You've got to manage things as you go along. You can't. There is a constitution that says every 5 years people must go to vote. So if you cancel this in the middle, you need still to put together a system that will enable you to work things within the given constitution. Maybe talking too much in abstract terms, but I can't resist this thing about Abahambe and so on. We South Africans were the first people to struggle against colonialism. Most of the people who colonized Africa came to this country. I think the next largest number may have been Algeria and Zimbabwe and so on. So the formation of resistance against colonialism was here. The ANC that met in 1912 had people who came from these places where you say Abaham. It was attended by those people. So that's why you never had the South African National Congress. It's the African National Congress of South Africa. There was one of Zimbabwe at one time, one of, and so on. So it's Bahambe Baebi. So, and when it's convenient, we say, where on earth do you find a map that has a straight line? It's drawn up by other people who keep one group this side and another, simply because it's convenient for them logistically, in other words, to do that. So it's nice when you say, oh, you see, these are colonial borders. But when it comes to difficulties that you have, you remember that you want to push these people into those colonial borders. I'm realistic enough to say we've got to work within that frame. Yes, you can't just, Malema is in trouble today because he says African and anywhere. I understand his sentiment, but you've got to do that. I always say that the day we manage the economy properly, all these people who want gone, you will want them here, because there will be so much work to do. And strategically, you are so well placed here. You've got the infrastructure, air, ground, and so on. So that's, let's be enlightened and know that it might take 10 years or to do this, but really the solution is not what we are doing. Not only is it cruel and ineffective, it is actually taking us away from what we ought to do, that awareness thing that we're talking about. What those people are doing is what is destructive to proper governance. I can't go into a position and take Monde because he is my friend. I mean, there's always room, if you needed him, to advise and go and so on. So that's what we need to address. Why is it easy and possible and permissible for these corporates to allow that to happen? A self-respecting person wouldn't do that. You'd go and check what material, what resources you have in a particular place, and see how best to work with it and how to shape it if there is a need to adopt the system that you want to use. So I don't know whether there's any solution other than to stop the nonsense of doing these things. It just is not. It's you guys in the corporate sometimes who come with my team and so on. I think we must be very careful about those things. You gravitate towards what you believe to be good character, good leadership, good person. They may not be, in terms of line management, the people who are accountable to you. That's just the starting point. And as you, I worked for Tambo much later, but for all the time that I was in the organization, we would invite him to give us a talk. We would find a way of sitting and then following this light and so on. There must be a search from the part of the person who needs empowerment for where they see the source of light. I'm talking about very informal arrangements now, because the answer would be your supervisor is the person who's going to give you this and so on. But we're talking beyond the frame of what you must do from 9 to 5 or what have you. I don't know, to be honest with you. There were people, Tambo happened to have been one of them. There are quite a few others. In fact, when people were talking about their mentors, the people whose names you would never even know have influenced me so much. And they say, Fanawa, my boy, you have to do things like this, that, and the other. And you listen to that. Names that will never appear in any documents, but their wisdom and the approach they have in response they have when you approach them, it tells you that there are conversations that can be had here and so on. It's a fuzzy answer because it's not easy to package it properly. The emails belong to these guys. When my wife was suggesting at one time that, it's taking up too much of your time. Why don't you do a schedule and have these people on these days and so on? I said, yeah, it would be nice like that, but sometimes when you put too much structure in these things, somebody has got their own individual issues, and it becomes one of the, and yet it may be the most effective and the most practical way of doing things. I wish we had time to talk about these things outside of here.
So, Msimang, any final words? What's your final parting words?
I want to say thank you very much for your attention. Sometimes you say nice things about us and they go to our heads and we think we're actually up there. To say also, you don't deal with perfect individuals. Your mentors will also have shortcomings. So let's not create, I don't think there's a human being who's totally that. So when you looking for this partnership, because it's a pairing of sorts, you really must do your bit also to facilitate the achievement of your own results and taking into account the foibles of the person you're talking to. I just thank you very much for your attention and for your time for this thing. Yeah.